With Dragonflight now only being 3 weeks away, we are starting to see Blizzard really hone in on small adjustments to tuning and bug fixes. So I figured this would be the perfect time for me to give my latest impressions about some of the classes. Now, I've already given my impressions about most of the other tanks, so if you're looking for those, you can find them in the description below. I've saved the best tank for last though. I'm kidding. Monk has some glaring issues, though in this video I want to go over the pros and cons of the class, what I like, what I hate, and what I hope will be buffed, and of course all things talent related for Mythic Plus. Obviously this is still beta and there are still a ton of possibilities for change, so that's something that we need to keep in mind. I plan on rolling out videos for each and every tank, so if that's something that interests you, feel free to subscribe. It's free after all. I'm really excited to talk about this class in particular, since despite how I've ranked it previously throughout the beta process, this is by far the most enjoyable tank for me to play. So let's dive in. As some of you might be aware, I'm mostly a Mythic Plus player at heart, so I'm going to be approaching this from a 5-man content angle. If you're curious about Raid, my overall take for Raid is pretty much play whatever you want. All tanks can provide a useful toolkit, buffs, or defensives. There are some talents that do cater more towards Raid, but I'm not really going to be going over that in this video. Starting the tree, we are given Tiger's Lust and the ability to branch off of it or pick other parts of the tree to start with. Similar to most classes, the Monk tree specifically has some pretty outstanding movement all the way throughout the tree. It's going to be pretty easy for us to hit any capstone that we're aiming for. Let's walk through this area of the tree, what I've been playing with, and talk about some potential trades. So we're going to start off with the following. Paralysis and Improved Paralysis, Detox, Ferocity of Zuen, Calming Presence, and Rising Sun Kick. If you ever need for some reason, you can trade Detox or Paralysis for Disable, but honestly outside of PvP I really can't think of a reason that you'd want to do this. But at this point we have one more point to spend. This is probably one of my largest complaints about this tree. Unfortunately we are going to have to play into Soothing Mists here. This will give us access to some great talents later on, but it's odd that the talent node is blocking an extra charge of roll. I feel like Blizzard can make some pretty easy changes here. I don't really play Mistweaver at all, and I rarely play Windwalker, but I feel like if they swapped the places of Soothing Mists and the extra charge of roll, and then maybe flopped these set of talents here horizontally, this tree would make more sense. I'm not really sure that it'll negatively affect the other specs. It would make this area of the tree feel much less shit for Brewmaster. Anyways, we're going to grab Soothing Mists and move on. With the second tier unlocked, we have some pretty juicy talents to aim for, especially a pretty amazing defensives like Diffuse Magic and Dampen Harm. We will need to actually pick up a few talent choices first that we're semi-used to having in our base kit, like Transcendence, Spear, Handstrike, and Fortifying. So the talents that we pick up here are Transcendence, Ring of Peace, Diffuse Magic, and then Dampen Harm. And then we're going to swing back to the right side of the tree where we're going to grab Spear, Handstrike, and Fortifying Brew, and then we're going to sink 2 points into Fast Feet. I also like the improved Fortified talent node. You can play either one, but personally Iron Shell Brew has been feeling pretty okay in dungeons. Sadly, either choice doesn't really change the fact that we're highly susceptible to magic damage though. And then following this, we're going to grab Strength of Spirit. With 2 points remaining, we have a good bit of flexibility. For example, I personally really like having access to Celerity since I'm not taking an extra charge of roll from the first tier of the tree. I've also seen a lot of players not take this node at all, or they play Chi Torpedo. I think it's really based on preference, and for me, I like having a lot of mobility as a tank spec. We're going to leave the mobility blank for now, and I'm going to want to put some points into healing since Brewmaster is suffering a lot in this area. We are hoping for some buffs, especially after the recent health buff that we saw last week without any compensation. We are going to place our point into Vigorous Expulsion and then 1 point into Grace of the Crane. After picking up these, we're actually going to unlock the third tier, so we're going to revisit this area soon. Unfortunately, the final capstone talents are fairly underwhelming for the Brewmaster Monk, so I wouldn't be too eager to get into this tier of the tree, but there are still some solid pickups. We're going to put 2 points into Fatal Touch and then 2 points into Resonant Fists, and this will cover a lot of our damage. Now, we have 7 points left to progress the Mistweaver side of the class tree. Picking up where we left off, we have 1 point left for Grace of the Crane, and then we can pick up Chi Wave, Profound Rebuttal, and then 2 points into Close to Heart. The main reason we're putting points into this area of the tree is in a sad attempt to provide a little bit more self-sustain. With the recent health buffs but no compensation to Brewmaster healing in general, the self-sustain is pretty lackluster, and that actually might be the understatement of the year. We're doing the best that we can here to make up for losing our Shadowlands tier set. With 2 points left, we can place these kind of wherever we really want to. If you want more mobility, you have the option to play an extra charge of roll, celerity, or Chi Torpedo. I know a lot of players have enjoyed the Summon White Tiger statue, and my hot take is that I think it's a garbage 2-minute cooldown, and without being able to replace it, it can cause a lot of problems. There are some talents that can be worth taking as well. For example, in higher level content, I really enjoy playing at least 1 point into Bounce Back. While it's pretty difficult for a Brewmaster to take a 20% health hit on a single melee swing, it's very likely that a spellcast may do this to you. The caveat with this talent though is you must know the damage profile of the key that you're doing, and it also probably needs to be much higher level of content. I've had a few people tell me you can also spend points on improved Vivify, and I like the thought of it, but energy cost is just still too high regardless. It's never practical for a monk to actually cast Vivify while in combat, so you'll quickly become energy starved. This tree isn't like super great when you focus on the 3rd tier, but the movement throughout the tree is pretty great, and there are a lot of cool options in the center tree that provide a lot more to the base kit. I think if Blizzard ever decided to revisit this tree, they should maybe reformat the 1st tier and probably buff the 3rd tier. The Ox Statue and Jade Serpent specifically just don't seem great, and they're very niche. Anyways, the Spec tree is a lot more fun to progress, so let's jump over there. Just like all talent trees, the 1st tier of this tree has us picking up a few fundamental monk abilities and passives like Keg Smash, Stagger, Purifying Brew, and Shuffle. While it might appear that you have a little bit of flexibility at this point, you really don't. Hit Scheme is needed to have access to Celestial Brew, which I think is an absolute must. Though it would be interesting to find a build that doesn't use Celestial Brew, like, at all. Next, Gift of the Ox is one of our primary passive and active healing amplifiers. This also feels like a must. You don't need to take this to progress through the rest of the tree, but similar to not playing towards Celestial Brew, feels like a troll. So now we have 1 point left. We do want to eventually access the right side of the tree, so the best choice here is probably rushing Jade Wind or Special Delivery. I've seen both being used. If you're a player who hates the button bloat of Brewmaster, you can find yourself running Special Delivery. But for players like myself, I've been running Rushing Jade Wind, which personally I enjoy, and I've been using since Battle for Azeroth, so this button feels very natural in the rotation. Now, with our points spent, we have plenty of paths through the 2nd tier of the tree. I think first, let's grab some staple abilities, and then we can break down some different options. First things first, we need Celestial Brew along with the improved node. We need Breath of Fire, and of course, improved Purifying Brew. We will also probably want to pick up Black Ox. While Black Ox doesn't provide as much damage as it used to, it still provides a pretty solid defensive option for alleviating some of your stagger in tense situations, and it's the only talent that'll actually give us access to the bottom center of the tree. Like I said earlier, we lost our Keg of the Heaven trait coming out of Shadowlands. It was a very powerful tier set in terms of healing with the additional effect of increased max health. I miss it pretty much every day. In order to combat this, we've already picked up a fair bit of healing nodes in the class tree, and now that we're looking at the Spec tree, I would suggest aiming for Gaiplin's Imperial Brew. Not only will this heal you based off of the stagger that you purify, but the new tier set's going to actually allow us to drop additional stagger, which means that it has direct synergy with this talent specifically. In order to pick that up, we're going to either need to take Zen Meditation or Graceful Exit. Personally, I'm going to pick up Zen Med, since it gives us better pathing for less points. With 5 points left, I want to commit to the Charred Passions build, which means that we want a few talents that synergize with that. In order to do so, we're going to have to grab Salsabim's Strength, which will get us permanent uptime on both Breath of Fire and then Charred Passions. I can't imagine we will ever not play this, it just provides so much damage and damage reduction. Our last point will actually go back towards the right side of the tree. Shadowboxing Treads, Facepalm, and then Light Brewing, and then finally we're going to pick up Bob and Weave. There are a lot of different little possibilities here if you want, like you can trade Bob and Weave for more control over your brews with Black Ox Brew. Also, if you find yourself looking for a little bit more damage and you feel comfortable with the damage intake, you can actually trade Light Brewing for Training of Nizao. I've played with both of these options, but personally these are the talents that I've settled on. Like I promised, we are going to be playing Charred Passions, and then to bolster that playstyle, we need to grab Counter-Strike immediately. After that, we want to grab some abilities that fit this playstyle. Since we're going to be hitting multiple targets with Blackout Kick, Elusive Footwork will tie in very nicely in order to get some additional stacks of Elusive Brawler, allowing us to dodge more frequently. And then now at this point, I just want to mention that there are a ton of different playstyle choices and a bunch of great talents. If you really enjoy Weapons of Order during Shadowlands, send it. If you prefer Bone Dust Brew, who gives a fuck? Grab it. Want a big amount of burst AoE? Exploding Keg is calling your name. I mean, you could play all three or none of these. Most of your damage is going to be coming from Charred Passions and Spinning Crane Kick with this build, so you have a good amount of freedom here to pick what you want. But let's walk through my build and why I like it. I personally love Bone Dust Brew, and I find the replica healing and damage to be quite nice. So we're going to grab That alongside Bountiful Brew, which will allow my abilities to have an extra chance to randomly just cast bonus brews. Next, I really enjoy playing Exploding Keg and Storm Stout's Last Keg. The burst damage from these are just extremely enjoyable. Once again, if you don't like the button bloat, I find that Blackout Combo is actually a super fun playstyle. Lastly, we have 2 points left where we can spend these into really whatever we want. With the buff to health but no expel harm buffs to compensate, at least after writing the script, I honestly have been leaning way more into Healing Elixir. It has replicating chances with Bonus Brew, it's off the GCD, and it technically got buffed since it heals for a percentage amount and not a flat amount. And then the last point I send into 1 stack of High Tolerance or Determination or Anvil and Stave, it really depends. This last point is fairly subjective along with the entire tree. I love the Monk tree simply for the fact that every day I keep finding weird little builds that pop up, and I think that it does a great job at highlighting how flexible and fun some of these trees are supposed to be. Not everything is optimal, but it doesn't have to be. This class allows each player to develop their own little build and what they enjoy. Personally, I'm still hoping to small buffs to stagger, though I fully recognize the trouble with that. Magic damage, despite us having access to a ton of great cooldowns, really can push into a Brewmaster's health pool. Either a buff to the effectiveness of stagger against magic damage or a buff to expel harm can easily put this tank into a very strong position for Dragonflight. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this class and about this talent setup. I have a lot more videos planned regarding Mythic Plus over the next few weeks and going into Dragonflight, so again, if that's something that interests you or if you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit that like button and that subscribe button. And I also want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons who support me with their actual dollars and dimes to allow me to make, well, whatever you really want to call this. Hope you guys are all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.